Good afternoon. Welcome to the Department of Justice Elder Justice Initiative Senior Abuse Financial Tracking and Accounting Training webinar. Just a few housekeeping items. Due to the high number of participants, computer audio will only be the option to listen to the presentation. So please make sure that your computer speakers are on. This webinar will be recorded and available on the Department of Justice Elder Justice Initiative website after this training. Closed captioning is provided in the pod below the presentation. If you're having issues viewing closed captioning and do not have the Adobe Connect app installed on your computer, please close out of this meeting, download the Adobe Connect application, and then rejoin the webinar. If you do not wish to download the app, close out of the webinar. Make sure Adobe Flash is enabled on your web browser and then rejoin the meeting. Then you click on the link and join with the classic view, and you can see that screenshot there below. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please contact Liza Ramos-Cook, who's me, who is providing technical support for this webinar at ramoscook_liza@fa.com, or you can also communicate with me in the chat pod. Now I'm going to turn this over to Julie Childs, attorney and consultant to the Elder Justice Initiative.
Thank you, Liza. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this wonderful webinar. I'm so looking forward to this presentation, as I hope you are as well. Just a little bit of background on the Elder Justice Initiative. The DOJ Elder Justice Initiative's mission is to support and coordinate the Department of Justice's enforcement and programmatic efforts to combat elder abuse, neglect, and financial fraud and scams that target older adults. We have many different points that we try to reach through this initiative, providing resources, training to older victims and their families, as well as supporting law enforcement and prosecutors and elder justice practitioners. So our website, elderjustice.gov, is our hub for all of these resources, including this webinar, as Liza mentioned, after it's taped. We'll post it and the PowerPoint as a reference. And on the website, you'll find that we have outreach materials, we have prosecutor video series, we have financial exploitation and reporting information, not only with the Elder Justice Initiative DOJ team, but also with federal partners. So it's, I think, useful information that you'll find on the website there for financial exploitation that is complementary to this webinar. You'll also find links to the SAFTA tool through the website, and also to our EAGLE tool, which is the Elder Abuse Guide for Law Enforcement, and it's a handy tool that law enforcement are using to help them recognize, prevent, and protect against elder abuse in the field. Of course, we have webinars listed, but not just on the website. We have webinars and trainings also on our YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube, please do look for us there as well. And I'd like to now, before I do introduce, let me just take a second to talk about the MDT network map that was just launched on the website, gathering networks that are working in multidisciplinary teams in the elder justice field, placing them on a map so that you can find one another more readily and recognize where people are across states. There's a portal to submit your MDT network to the Elder Justice Initiative, and we hope that you'll take a look at the network map and either submit your network or find one near you. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Karen Weber, who is a CPA, CFE. She's a forensic accountant in private practice in Rochester, New York, where she plays an integral role in the expansion of elder abuse enhanced multidisciplinary teams, EMDTs, across New York State. Karen partnered with the IACP, so the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Elder Justice Initiative to develop the SAFTA tool based on her work investigating hundreds of financial exploitation cases over the last 11 years. So it's my pleasure to now turn it over to Karen and to the webinar. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Julie. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to walk you through the SAFTA tool. As Julie said, SAFTA was developed through a partnership with the International Association Chiefs of Police with funding from the Elder Justice Initiative. After the DOJ came to me in January of 2018, asking how they could create a tool to assist investigators with their financial exploitation cases. And experienced investigators generally have a deeper background in Excel and data analysis and usually have some OCR software that converts their bank statement data into spreadsheets. We can run pivot tables on that and carry on with our investigations. However, for many others, without this skill set, financial exploitation cases are a challenge. So it was interesting for me to kind of take a step back and think about my processes for working these cases in layman's terms. You know, understanding that the tool had to be built on this platform that was kind of universally available, and that's why we settled on a basis of Microsoft Excel. So the IACP and I built a draft Excel workbook that performs the very basic functions necessary to start a financial exploitation case. The IACP then took the workbook to a VBA who could write code over the spreadsheet such that a user could navigate the workbook, but without any basic Excel knowledge. So that was huge. And thus the SAFTA tool was born. So I'm going to walk you through our Senior Abuse Financial Tracking and Accounting program known as SAFTA. And what's really cool is that SAFTA is also a Hebrew word for grandmother. The SAFTA guide I'm about to show you walks the user through a financial exploitation investigation and then ultimately through the use of the SAFTA Excel-based tool as well. So I'll demo the functionality of the SAFTA tool, and then I'll introduce Jim Foley from the National White Collar Crime Center, who will open it up for Q&A later. So again, the SAFTA consists of two parts used in conjunction with each other, the SAFTA guide and the SAFTA tool. The SAFTA guide consists of four main sections: identifying financial exploitation, gathering financial records, analyzing bank statements, and then ultimately presenting financial evidence. So I'm going to open this up when I get to the demo part, I will walk you through that. That will be easier. The SAFTA tool itself is the Excel-based workbook built to support financial exploitation investigations by providing easy-to-use methods for data entry and transaction analysis. And when used with the SAFTA guide, an investigator can perform many of the steps a forensic accountant might use in a financial exploitation case and document all of that work along the way. Shortly, when I show you the SAFTA tool, on the opening page, when you sign into the SAFTA workbook, you'll be prompted to enter a username and a password that you create. And once entered, you're automatically taken to the Welcome tab of the workbook. The Welcome tab contains 9 key buttons to kind of help you navigate through there. They are enter case details through populate dashboard, and some of those we have to the left. Obviously, I'll show you them in the demo later. Other buttons we have are showcase details. That's something that will expand the workbook to show all of your tabs. There's a button that says navigate to admin tab. That helps users customize the administrative items like access to the workbook, specific fields that appear in the pop-up menus, etc. So you have the ability, if you want, to customize this workbook even further. But if you don't, you can just use the normal default admin settings that are in the workbook already. The first button is Enter Case Details. This is where you are going to input information like your case number, or if you're law enforcement, a crime report number. You can enter the victim's name, information on the lead investigator, any notes on the case that you want to capture in this one place. You can record the investigation start date, the investigation end date, and you can also document the number of suspects in your cases. whether it's 1, 5, whatever, you have a place to document that. The next button is enter bank account information. Here you're going to record things like account number, the financial institution, the account type, checking account, savings account, etc. Who are the account owners, and also owner type. And in the owner type column, you're going to be able to use a drop-down menu to select whether the owner is the victim, the suspect, both, unknown, or other, depending on the information in your case. The following button is Enter Bank Statement Summary Data. And this is information that you can grab just from the face of the bank statement. Generally, on the face of a bank statement, you're going to see statement date, the beginning balance of the account at the beginning of the period, deposits that occurred and sums during the period. Sometimes they're broken out by types of deposits, oftentimes they're not. Same thing on the withdrawal side. Sometimes they tell you total withdrawals, and other times they may summarize it and break it out by category, such as ATMs, checks, debit card purchases, etc. The way that this workbook is set up, if you're given that summary detail on the face of the statement, you will be able to enter that statement data in this dialog box that I'm going to show you later. But all the information that you enter into the Statement Summary Data tab will automatically populate a Statement Summary tab that's going to let you look at the activity in the account chronologically. And again, I'll demo that shortly. So like I said, the Statement Summary tab, that's just a summary of the chronological activity and account balances. Within that, you can highlight areas of concern, like if you happen to see deposits declining over time, withdrawals increasing, something like that. And you can make notes on important facts or changes in patterns using some of the features that we've built in. Next is the Enter Transaction Data button. And this is when you start to take a deep dive into the transaction activity. You can record the important elements. Oh, I just got to share my screen button.
I'll pull that back up.
Yeah, thank you.
It will be up in just a minute.
I do see a question I can answer really quickly here. There's a question, what type of OCR software people are using. That's something that I can share information with folks at the DOJ if they want to share that. There are a lot of programs out there. ScanWriter is one, Perfect Audit is another, BankScan is another. There's a whole bunch.
It's uploading. It'll be up in just a second. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Right, and we were on the Enter Transaction Data tab. Perfect. So in the Enter Transaction Data, when you click that button, it takes you to a pop-up menu where you can record statement date, what date, what statement did that come off of, the January 31st, 2020 statement. And then you can record the transaction date, the date the actual transaction took place. You can capture whether it's a deposit or withdrawal, and what type of transaction it was. Was it, yes, it's a withdrawal, but was it an ATM withdrawal or was it a check? That's what you'll capture with transaction type. There's also a field for check number. If you're entering check data, you can capture that there. You can record the payor or payee. In this case, if it was a debit card purchase, for example, you could record that it was at Walmart. You can record the amount of the transaction, and then there are some additional fields. And, on the left-hand side of the screen, these are the really key elements. If you want to do any kind of good analysis, you want to be looking at this stuff. But on the right-hand side, there's also different fields that might be of interest to you. Certainly these are ones that we use all the time. Location. Location is really important for things like ATM withdrawals. And some of the cases, especially cases in New York City where you have a victim who is bedbound, yet once we populate the addresses in our map software, we can kind of trace the patterns that a perpetrator used with the ATM card and show that there's no way that this victim would ever be able to get there. So location is a great field to capture for that purpose. The memo line, this is really great for checks because there's a lot of important details on the memo lines of checks, and we want to capture that. So there is a field there. There's also a field for signature. Again, an important element because when you have a joint account, who's signing for that transaction? Who signed that check? Who signed that withdrawal slip? Who endorsed that deposit item? So if you want to capture that information, signature and endorsement are there. And there's also a column for bank stamp. And we included this because many times we see checks written to cash. And depending on the bank that the check is ultimately deposited to, we may be able to see that bank. And now we know where the suspect banks, and we can send our subpoenas there. So if we just capture a bank stamp, we might be able to pick up some additional banks that either the victim or the suspect uses, which would be helpful for an investigation. So those fields all exist within the Enter Transaction Data tab. Next is the Pivot Table tab. Once all of your transactions are entered, they automatically populate a data set that creates an automatically generated pivot table. And what a pivot table does is organize and sum your data chronologically. So you can see all the money that came in from where, because you've labeled it, and all the money that went out and to where over time. And this really allows for a fast and easy analysis of account activity versus flipping through your bank statements page by page. And the slicers that are built in, that's a feature I'll demo for you shortly, those isolate key focus areas. So maybe you want to look at the activity in the account before the perpetrator got involved versus after. And you can kind of move the slicer buttons around to get that visual. And you can also, not just isolate periods of time, but also certain types of transactions. If you only want to look at, for example, ATM patterns or deposit patterns, that kind of thing. So the SAFTA guide that goes along with the SAFTA tool offers a lot more considerations for your review of the Pivot Table tab to kind of walk you through what you might want to look for once you get to this phase of the investigation. So finally, there is a Populate Dashboard tab, and this is really cool because as your data is entered in and your pivot tables and summary tabs are being created, the data generates these graphs. And there we have line graphs, bar graphs, pie charts that kind of summarize the data that you've seen automatically. There are 4 core charts that will pop up. You'll see them in a minute. But it also has the feature for you to create your own graphs based on dialog boxes that are really easy to use. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a demo. But first, let's look at our case background. So our case background is John Smith, an 81-year-old widower who resides in Anytown, USA. Local police received a referral from APS, whom they believe is being financially exploited by a friend, Tom Thief, who moved in with Mr. Smith in the spring of 2011. We know that Tom Thief is employed at the corner store where Mr. Smith goes to get cash and play his scratch-off. And the police, of course, subpoenaed his bank records, the victim's bank records, to look for evidence. Obviously, in a case, especially if law enforcement is involved, you're going to be looking at the suspect's information too. One thing, if I don't get to it at the end of this presentation, we recommend that you keep one workbook for the victim's accounts and a separate SAFTA workbook for the suspect's accounts. It just makes more sense. But using the SAFTA tool, Investigator Jones enters all the bank statement data that comes back into the SAFTA tool to kind of look at activity over the year 2011. So now we can go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see the workbook here? I'll zoom in so it makes a little more sense. Looks great. So, like I said, for ease of this presentation, I bypassed the login credentials piece. There are photos of that within the SAFTA guide that you can see what that looks like. But when you enter your credentials that you create and you get to your Welcome tab, here are the 9 buttons that I talked to you about. The very first one is Enter Case Details. And you'll see this dialog box pops up where you can enter your case number, you can enter the victim's name, you know, our investigator is Jones. Any notes that we had, maybe it's just referred by APS. We can record the start date of this investigation, which was maybe January 1st of 2012. It's still going on, so I won't worry about an end date. And we just have one suspect, of course, which is Mr. Tom Thief. As soon as I hit Input Case Details, that information is recorded right here on the Case Details tab. So if ever I need to refer back to it, it's in there. Or my supervisor wants to look at it, the information is in there. The next piece is the Suspect and Victim Data Entry tab. Now you can enter more details about who your suspect is and who your victim is. So of course we know our victim is John Smith. We could record his address if we were interested, gender if we were interested, his birth date. If he has a power of attorney, we can record it there. What was the referral source? You know, of course, in this case, we know it was APS. And then we can kind of enter the summary of abuse. You know, when the referral came to you, what was the prime complaint? And that narrative could go in here. We click Input Data, and then it asks you, do you want to input another suspect or victim? You hit yes, and you can start to enter the suspect's information. Of course, that's Tom Thief, his address, phone number, gender, etc., and input data. Once you're done entering, you can hit no, and it takes you back to the Welcome tab. So for the next piece, enter bank account information. Here's where we're going to document all the bank accounts we know that Mr. Smith has. Remember, we're keeping Mr. Smith's account information separate from Mr. Thief's. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, account number from ABC Bank, and it is a checking account. And the owner we know is Mr. Smith, who is the victim. We captured all that information. When we hit Input Account Summary, what it's going to do is, of course, ask you if you want another. In this case, we don't. It's going to automatically create tabs that will capture all the data that you enter. And then we'll go and we'll click Enter Monthly Bank Statement Summary Data. And now we'll start to record the information off of our bank statement. So for example, here is a sample bank statement. We know we started out, we have a beginning balance we can enter in, that's $11,657, deposits are $3,730, checks are 3,800, et cetera, we should come up with an ending balance of 11,570.50. That's the information that we're going to be entering in this bank statement summary tab. So here is the dialog box. We're going to be entering data for account 1234. Our statement date, the last day of the statement was January 13th of 2011. Our beginning balance, as we saw, was 11,657.94. We had deposits of 3730. That came right off the face of the statement. No transfers in. Now, for purposes of this example, we'll say maybe they broke out ATM withdrawals as well as checks. They didn't have debit card purchases on the statements or transfers out, other withdrawals, any of that. Our ending balance is 11,570.50. We hit input statement summary. And then it will ask you, would you like to add another statement? Of course, if you're looking at a year of records, you're going to hit yes and carry on and enter the February statement data. For purposes of this demo, I'm going to hit no, but I'm going to show you where that information was ultimately captured when you entered it in. And I'll show you a completed workbook at the end. You're going to see a January 13th statement, February, in chronological order, and you're going to be able to see what the balance of the account did over time, what the deposits were, how the ATM withdrawals increased or decreased, and start your analysis that way. If you wanted to take a deeper dive into the transaction data after looking at your summary data, you have the option here at the Enter Transaction Data tab. Again, it pulls up a dialog box. You choose account number 1234 or whichever account you happen to be working in, and record all of those same details, statement date, transaction date, depositor withdrawal, etc. And at the end, you would hit Input Transaction Data. And what that would do is populate this transaction data tab and automatically fill in the field statement date, transaction date, depositor withdrawal, etc. So what I'm going to show you after all that information is in, let's look at what a complete workbook looks like. If I can actually there. Here we have a completely filled out statement summary tab. So we can see things like the account balance actually declines, it's generally around 11.5, declines a little bit in September of 13 and kind of stays there. We know he gets perhaps pension income, Social Security income. That appears consistent over time, so maybe we're not too concerned about that. On the ATM withdrawal side, things we know about Mr. Smith is he goes down to the corner store a lot and he plays scratch off. And from what it looks like, $800 this month, $800 this month, $600. Well, all of a sudden it's $1,200, and we know that Tom Thief moved in with him in spring of 2011. So maybe the ATM transactions are something we're going to want to dive into. That's what looking at the data in this statement summary format helps us do, is kind of narrow down which pieces of the investigation we want to focus on. So we'll go ahead and enter our transactions. That will come out in this transaction data tab looking like this. And from the data tab, our dashboard is created. We track by graph the balance of the account. We graph withdrawals by type. We can compare spending versus what was deposited in either a bar chart or a line chart. But the real treasure here is this pivot table tab, because once you get that information in, you can look at all our deposits and where they came from. So we got veteran benefits, Social Security every month. Checks, where did those checks go? How about the ATMs? Which ATMs did he use? And these up here are your slicers. If you just want to look at activity in the first quarter, you minimize your slicer to quarter one. This gives us a good idea of what Mr. Smith's spending was before spring of 2011 when Tom Thief moved in. Well, what if we want to look at it afterward? Maybe we'll focus on Q2 and Q3. Maybe his expenses increase. 2001 Canal Street, that must be the corner store. Well, in Q4, all of a sudden we see the ATMs being used at this 123 Main Street location. Has our victim ever been there? You know, that's the kind of data we can isolate using the slicer features. And you can narrow down which items you want to look at with the type filters up here. So that is our SAFTA tool. There's one additional feature that I want to highlight, which is really great in terms of visuals. Say we're looking at this balance of account graph, and we know perhaps that Tom Thief maybe got power of attorney on July 1st of 2011. Again, this just worked. But that timeline gets inserted when it's not bugged right here. So you would be able to demonstrate this dotted vertical line and the subsequent decrease. And hopefully that chart helps you demonstrate that financial exploitation is occurring. So that, in short, is the SAFTA tool. And we can switch back to the presentation slide. So going forward, the National White Collar Crime Center is going to be managing the any technical assistance on the SAFTA tool side of things, and I'm going to open it up to Jim Foley, who will be the contact. His email address is here, so we can start our Q&A session.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. This is Jim Foley, by the way. And I noticed there have been some questions coming in through the Q&A. Up until this point in time, there was a few very minor technical things early on, and the only real recent request was actually not a request, but it was a person saying how well the tool worked for them. So that was always good to hear. We do have a few questions over here in the Q&A section. If I could go through some of these. Some of you have been asking about the using OCR software and importing the data then into the SAFTA tool. And most of the OCR software, such as ScanWriter and some of those, basically they import into Excel, but not into the SAFTA tool as such. As far as I know, there is no way to actually take the like the information from ScanWriter and put it into the drop-down menus and that sort of thing. But I think, let's see. But actually, I have heard very good things about ScanWriter, as well as a few of the other ones. I noticed someone mentioned that the customer service was good with them. I've also heard that same account. And let's see, what else? There's quite a few questions popping up. The question about deleting the dummy data that you had put in just to check it out. I've heard that problem before, and usually it takes a restart of a new workbook. Actually, there are some things that there actually still are a few questions I have about the protecting and unprotecting, which I will try to find out in the near future.
And there's also a button within the SAFTA tool where you can clear the workbook and start a new one. So you just click a button,
right.
It opens a brand new SAFTA workbook, and you're on your way.
Right, as opposed to deleting information trying to put it in the same way. Let's see. Actually, the questions are popping up and moving around.
There's a question about importing the OCR output or spreadsheet into ScanWriter. That isn't a feature that we have built into this, but it is something we can think about for the future.
Karen, do you see any other questions up there? That the one question about acquiring funding for OCR and that type of software, it looked like someone mentioned they had received some funding, but I'm not aware of any programs that are offering that to agencies at the moment anyway. But if there are some out there, that would be good information to share.
There's a question here about making edits to data outside of the buttons on the Welcome tab. We have protected the workbook so that you can't. However, in the admin function, you can remove those protections. So you could just simply overwrite, for example, on the case details tab. The SAFTA was built really for people who didn't have the experience in Excel, who needed really those dialog boxes to move through. But yes, if you remove the admin protections, you should be able to overwrite. And yes, if you decide, there's a question here that says, so when you are entering the banking info, are you entering every line of every transaction on the statement or scanning the statements into the program or workbook? Yes, if you have decided to take a deeper dive into the transaction level for every single transaction, you would be entering them in. If, for example, you were only focused on the ATM side of things, you would just isolate the ATM transactions and enter them in there. And yes, it does sound like a lot of data entry, but that's why we have the OCR software in case that was a route that you didn't want to go. In all of the features that exist, the pivot table, for example, there are a lot of Excel tutorials online that once you get that data from an OCR reading software, you can read an Excel tutorial and create your own pivot table just like the one that exists here in the SAFTA tool.
I may be still missing some, but I think Karen just hit the other couple that I was seeing.
There's a question here, what's the availability of the SAFTA tool? So Jim, can you talk about where that resides and how people can get access to it?
The, on the International Association of Chiefs of Police website, in fact, if you just Google, the SAFTA tool and IACP, it will get you to the page that has some other elder abuse and exploitation resources. And as you scroll down, there's a download link to the guide and one to the tool. And I think it also has my email address there as well. So if you have some questions, you can send me an email, and if it's a question that I can't answer, I'll find somebody who can.
And just because it resides on the IACP website doesn't mean that it's only for law enforcement professionals. APS, any agency, can go to their website, it's public access, and download the SAFTA tool and the accompanying guide.
Yes, good point.
And thank you, Victoria Gulick actually just shared the link right on the chat page, so you can access
yes.
From the chat page right now.
I was afraid to try to say it out loud because I figured I would mess it up. So thank you, Victoria.
Another question, is this copyrighted? No, open access, so anyone can use it. There's a question here about testimony. It says, has anyone asked or used this in testimony? And that is really a question that Jim can probably answer later on. The SAFTA tool isn't something that I use in my practice simply because I have the software, but I testify off of my software all the time. So generally, as long as you are confident that your software is accurate, you're capturing all the transactions and they reconcile to the bank statements that are submitted as evidence in court, it is accepted.
And if you're working with a prosecutor, that might be a good question to ask that prosecutor, because sometimes things change from place to place in terms of what they feel is appropriate.
For any further questions that you might have, navigate to elder.justice@usdoj.gov. And if anyone wants to reach out to me specifically, I would tell you the easiest way is to just go to my website, which is webbercpa.com, WEBBERCPA.com. My email address is there. A chat function is there. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. Happy to answer SAFTA questions.
Thank you so much, Karen and Jim and Liza, for this wonderful webinar. I think it was really helpful.
Great. Thanks for having me.